What made you finally realize that the black sheep of your family deserved better? I used to be the golden child, which looking back, was just a fancy way of saying I was the one who knew how to hold my breath the longest. My older brother, Silas, was the opposite. He was the human lightning rod. If there was tension in the house, Silas would crack a joke that went too far, or he'd wear something my dad hated, or he'd just exist too loudly. Growing up in our house was like navigating a minefield where the mines moved every day. My parents had this incredible, terrifying gift for rewriting reality. If Dad threw a plate, it was because Silas had provoked him by breathing wrong. If Mom stayed in bed for 3 days in a dark room, it was because Silas had stressed her out with his grades. I stayed quiet. I got the A's, kept my room like a museum, and because I was rewarded for my silence, I eventually started to believe the narrative. I thought Silas was the problem. I thought he was the reason we couldn't just be a normal family. The shift, the moment the scales actually fell off my eyes, didn't happen during some big explosion. It happened over a bowl of cold cereal on a Tuesday night. I was 17. Silas was 19, still living at home, working a grueling shift at the warehouse and trying to save enough to get out. He'd come home late, smelling like cardboard and sweat, and he was trying to be quiet. But the floorboards in our hallway are old, and they groan if you even look at them. Dad came charging out of his room like he'd been shot out of a cannon. He started in on Silas immediately. It wasn't about the noise, really. It was about everything. He called him a leech, a failure, a stain on the family name. I was standing in the shadows of the kitchen, frozen. I did what I always did. I made myself invisible. But then Dad turned to me. He saw me standing there, and his face shifted from rage to this eerie, sickening warmth. "See, Leo," Dad said, gesturing toward Silas like he was a piece of trash. "This is why I'm hard on you, so you don't end up like this. You're the only one who actually loves this family. The only one who isn't trying to destroy us." And then he looked at Silas and said, "You're lucky your brother is here to balance out the shame you bring into this house." Silas didn't fight back. He didn't even look up. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, taking it. But for the first time, I didn't feel like the good son. Felt like a weapon. I realized in that heartbeat that my goodness was being used to justify the cruelty Silas was drowning in. My silence wasn't peace. It was permission. That night, after the house went dark, I crept into Silas's room. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at a small, beat-up suitcase he'd hidden under a pile of dirty laundry. "Silas," I whispered. He jumped, his eyes darting to the door like he expected another blow. When he saw it was just me, he exhaled, but he didn't relax. "Go back to sleep, Leo. Don't get caught in the blast radius." "I saw it," I said. My voice was shaking. "I saw what he did. It wasn't you. It's never been you." Silas looked at me then, and the expression on his face, it wasn't relief. It was heartbreak, because he'd spent 19 years being the villain so I could be the hero, and he realized the lie was finally over. "He's going to leave on Friday," Silas said, his voice barely a breath. "I've got enough for a bus ticket to Chicago and a week at a hostel. I wasn't going to tell you." "Take me with you," I said. "You have a full ride to state, Leo. You have the perfect life here." "It's not perfect," I snapped, the words finally bubbling over. "It's a set. It's a stage play, and I'm sick of the script. If you're the black sheep because you refuse to pretend he's not a monster, then I want to be one too." The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I moved through the house like a ghost, watching my parents with a clarity that was almost painful. Every sweet thing Mom said felt like a trap. Every proud look from Dad felt like a shackle. Friday came. The plan was simple. Silas would leave for his shift at 4 p.m., but he'd have his bag in the trunk of his beat-up Honda. I was supposed to be at soccer practice, but at 3:30, Dad came home early. He was in one of those moods, the simmering kind. He sat at the kitchen table and started picking apart the way Silas had parked the car. "He's doing it on purpose," Dad muttered, his eyes dark. "He's trying to mark his territory. He thinks he's a man because he carries boxes for a living." I felt that familiar coldness in my gut. Usually I would have nodded. I would have said, "I'll talk to him, Dad." But instead I sat down across from him. "He parked that way because the curb is crumbling, Dad. It's just a car." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad looked at me like I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. "What did you say?" I said, "Leave him alone." Dad stood up slowly. The golden child had just cracked, and he didn't know how to handle it. "You've been spending too much time with with him. He's infecting you. He's turning you against your own father. No, I said, standing up too. My heart was thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He's the only one who's been protecting me from you. Just then, Silas walked into the kitchen. He saw the standoff, saw my packed backpack by the door, the one I'd tried to hide behind the coat rack, and his face went pale. Leo, get in the car, Silas said. His voice was different now. It wasn't the voice of the troublemaker. It was the voice of a man who had nothing left to lose. He's not going anywhere, Dad roared. Silas stepped between us. He wasn't bigger than Dad, but he was solid. He's 17, Dad. In 6 months he's legal. But he's leaving today. If you want to stop him, you have to go through me. And I think we both know I've had plenty of practice taking whatever you've got. The look on Dad's face. It wasn't just anger. It was fear. He realized the black sheep had finally led the rest of the flock away, and he was going to be left in a very quiet, very empty house. We didn't wait for a response. We grabbed our bags and ran. We drove for 6 hours before we stopped for gas. The sun was setting over the flat Indiana fields, casting everything in this bruised, purple light. Silas stood by the pump, looking at the horizon, his hands finally still. I got out of the car and walked over to him. Silas! He looked at me, and for the first time in my life I saw my brother. Not the disappointment, not the problem child, but the person who had carried the weight of a whole family's dysfunction on his back so I wouldn't have to. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry I let them make me think you were the bad guy. Silas reached out and pulled me into a hug. It was clumsy and smelled like cheap gasoline, but it was the most honest thing I'd ever felt. Don't be sorry, Leo, he said. The black sheep just sees the world in color. Welcome to the club. We're in Chicago now. It's loud, it's expensive, and we're both working 2 jobs to keep our tiny radiator clanking apartment. My parents still send texts. Mom sends guilt trips, Dad sends threats, but I blocked them both months ago. Sometimes when we're sitting on our fire escape, watching the L train rattle past, I think about that golden life I left behind. And then I look at Silas, who's finally laughing at a joke that isn't a defense mechanism, and I realize I didn't lose a family, finally found one. The golden cage and the black sheep's secret bravery.